on behalf of the UGA Sustainable Food Systems Initiative and our Interdisciplinary Graduate Certificate in Sustainable Food Systems, I'm really pleased to welcome you to this panel discussion today. The panel is supported by our USDA National Needs Fellowship, and the topic and the speakers were selected by our National Needs Fellows, Whitney Barr, Kate Costello, Abigail Darwin, Natalie Perkins, and Paige Weiler. We're super excited to welcome our panelists today. They really represent the breadth of fields that contribute to making agriculture and food systems more sustainable, more equitable, and more resilient. Our panelists are Miss Elizabeth Hill from EPA USDA, Honeybee Pollinator Research Coordinator, Farmer Jamila Norman from Patchwork City Farms in Atlanta, Georgia, Dr. Safira Sutton of Biomes, and Dr. Stephen Mirksy from Sustainable Ag Systems Lab at the USDA Agricultural Research Service. So thanks to each of you for taking your time out of your busy schedules today to join us. In a moment, I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves and tell us a bit more about their career trajectories. But first, one housekeeping note. There's a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Please go ahead and use that to submit your questions for the panelists. We'll be monitoring that thread. And if you'd like to ask your question out loud, go ahead and use the hand raise function, and we'll try to get as many of your questions answered during the session as possible. We're also going to save that Q&A, and we'll share your questions with panelists after the session. So if you have something that we don't get to, hopefully they'll be able to follow up with you on that. So we're going to go ahead and get on with it. Izzy, will you please get us started? Tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got there.
Sure, thank you. So again, my name is Izzy Hill, and I am currently the Honeybee and Pollinator Research Coordinator for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And this job is housed in the office of the Chief Scientist. And it's really a fascinating job because unlike previous government jobs where you tend to work in one area, pollinators, there's over 14 offices that work in that particular portfolio. So I work with 14 different offices, and I also work with several other federal agencies and external stakeholders, and trying to coordinate what we're doing and the most efficient ways to do it in terms of supporting pollinator health. So it's really an exciting job, a dream job for me, frankly, but it is not where I started or thought I would end up. For undergrad was actually a business major and a marketing major, so nothing to do with sustainable agriculture or agriculture at all, although I had a lot of my childhood spent on farms and working on farms, so I always had a love for it. And when it came time to decide to go work or go to grad school, I looked at University of Georgia and saw that they had an environmental economics degree, which seemed like a perfect match for me. So I was in CAES and then went on to do some more work in ecology. And I know a lot of the folks on the phone are in certificate programs, and that's exactly what I did with ecology as well, and did a conservation ecology and sustainable development degree. And I'll tell you, that was so valuable in hindsight, having that on my resume. I think it was sort of my foot in the door to show that I was able to chat with multiple folks across different disciplines, which was just so key. And in hindsight, I would recommend it to anyone. So I found myself in a situation where I just needed to get a job. And my background had been in actually in tree canopy and stormwater management was my interest in grad school, but a job opened up at EPA and pesticides, which was not my interest. And I frankly was hoping to move over to the Office of Water. But then I fell in love with it. It was really interesting. It was systems-based. Pest management is just this really, really interesting, intricate world with lots of considerations, including effects on pollinators. And so while I was at EPA, I started a side business, and it grew into a full-on honey production. I would produce queens and nukes, which are small colonies for sale. So I had a side gig going during my career, and I got pretty into it and decided to leave the government. And I went to University of Maryland to work extension and was the urban agriculture and food systems educator. And it was such a great experience, but also exhausting. And I'm so glad I did it. But anyone who's worked extension or, you know, those sorts of jobs we were going farm to farm, it's a lot. And I wanted to have a family. So I went back to the government, and luckily, you know, I was welcomed back to EPA and eventually ended up over at USDA. And, you know, it was definitely sort of all over the place, but everything I've done, I think was very supportive in helping me to have a good perspective for my current career path or career trajectory. So I'm happy to be here. Feel free to ask any questions. And yeah, that sounds great. I'll pass it back to Jim now.
Thanks, Izzy. I'm going to pass the mic to you, Jamila.
Hello, gotta unmute myself. Hello, everyone. My name is Jamila Norman, and I actually started at UGA as well. I went to the University of Georgia. I initially wanted to do an environmental science degree, but at the time UGA didn't have that. So I did environmental management and economics. And then found out that in that degree, that wasn't really what I wanted to do. And so my advisor suggested, he was like, we have an environmental engineering program. And I think from what you're telling me is that that's really kind of what you want to do. You want to be more of a problem solver, you know? So I was like, yeah. So I didn't know anything about the engineering department, and that's how I was introduced to it. And I went into environmental engineering. And I really did. I loved it. And I was like, yes, it's a lot more science than a lot more math than I was hoping to do, but you know, I was still good at it. So I got my degree in environmental engineering, and interviewed and ended up starting my work at the state of Georgia. So I did environmental engineering for the state of Georgia, working in water, national discharge permits for industry, so inspections and, you know, reviewing paperwork that industry sent in, and we were really the compliance side of things. And then, so that started that, maybe 2006 or something. But then started farming and really growing food on the side. So I too had a side gig. Working for the state of Georgia, and I started my small farm, Patchwork City Farms, right in the city of Atlanta. And I didn't go in thinking I wanted to be a farmer. I just started it to just have better food options for my family and for Southwest Atlanta, the community that I lived in that was just riddled with the worst food ever. And I figured, hey, look, I'm young, I can grow some food. And it just kind of like really grew from there. And eventually in 2016, actually they let me go at the state. That's really what happened. But it was actually one of the happiest days of my life because I was miserable and not really knowing how to transition out, you know, trying to figure it out. And so, yeah, so I transitioned, so left the state. And I was still working as a farmer, but then also I had started a cooperative, a farmers co-op, to organize the Black growers and a lot of the farms in Southwest Atlanta that were here. So I was part-time at the co-op working on behalf of other farmers while also operating the farm. I did a couple of other did some work with another farming organization in town. And then in 2016, I ended up purchasing property, 1.2 acres, 5 minutes from my house in the city to have a permanent location for the farm. And since 2017, I've been farming full time on this property. And that is kind of like, you know, where I am, you know, what I'm doing I guess I mean, it's really been 10 years since I had the farm, but 4 of it was working at the state and doing the farm. And yeah, in that time, I will say definitely that my engineering and just like a little bit of like that experience definitely informs how I farm, definitely informs kind of like the ways that I look at what I'm doing and recognizing that, you know, beyond just farming, I'm actually stewarding land in the city. I deal with a lot of water issues, wastewater issues. The wastewater infrastructure in Atlanta is old and antiquated, and I'm experiencing the negative effects of that on the site that I have. But you know, dealing with it, figuring out solutions to mitigate it. And that degree was really helpful, and just helps me to kind of like think system, you know what I mean? Like I'm thinking about like the full system of what's happening, and then thinking about and working with the co-op and other farmers, just thinking holistically um, in the way and holistically in how I operate the farm. So yeah, so committed to organic growing practices, and you know, really thinking about pollinator issues and water issues, wastewater issues, food distribution. So it's agriculture is definitely a field that you it touches so much, you know, and you're engaging with so many different industries, and engaging with so much that you have to consider and think about. And it's also an industry that's very much impacted by what happens all around you, especially when you're actually, you know, cultivating land and growing food. So I'm excited to be here. Definitely ask me any questions. I've been in the industry for a while on a lot of boards with different organizations, and just working in 50 million ways to, you know, push the work forward, make sure that it's equitable, and just get, you know, different people engaged and involved. So glad to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Jamila. Dr. Safira Sutton.
Hello, good morning, everyone. So my name is Safira Sutton, and initially I started out playing basketball, and I actually was not even really interested in school. So I really was only interested in what GPA do I need to be on the team. And then basketball, before the WNBA came out, there was only the NBA. So I just knew I was going to be on Michael Jordan's team. And then I slowly realized like that's not what I was going to do. So I moved back home, and that's where I started at Fort Valley. And I decided I didn't want to play basketball anymore. So I had to find a way that I was going to pay for school, because I was used to having that done for me through basketball. And so I got introduced into biotechnology in the agricultural field. And my mentor at the time told me if I started classes in the summer and I maintained the GPA, that he'd give me a scholarship for the remainder of my time there to finish out my bachelor's. And so that's where I was introduced into plant biotechnology, and I just fell in love with it, because before, when I was playing basketball, I was taking everything. I was taking business, I was taking economics, I was taking science, I was just taking whatever was open that I could take. And so when I made that shift, it was a great shift, and I fell in love with it. And I've been doing plant sciences and biotech ever since. And I finished my bachelor's at Fort Valley, and then I shifted to my master's at FAMU. But I must say, when I finished my bachelor's, I was like, I'm done with school. Like, I'm tired of school. I don't want to do it anymore. And then I got convinced to do a master's, and I was like, oh, okay, well, fine. I don't have anything to do right now, so okay, I'll do it. So then I got a master's in plant science and biotechnology. And then again, as you can imagine, I was done with school again after that. And I was like, nobody's convincing me to continue to go to school anymore. And then I got reconvinced to go to UGA. And so then that's how I started my PhD at UGA, where I switched from plant sciences into plant pathology, because I wanted to mix up my background a little bit. And once I got into plant pathology, let me tell you, I've never looked at anything in the grocery store the same ever since. Like, every time I see a spot, I'm like, oh my God, it's a pathogen. I'm about to eat that. Like, so it was very interesting, very fun. And I just recently actually finished up my PhD at UGA at the end of 2019. And so I graduated December 2019, and I started looking for jobs. And I was going to go into academia for a little while, but then COVID hit. So that got put on pause. And so I started really thinking about like what I wanted to do. And as I was at UGA, my background was to look for a biological control approach to control diseases of watermelons. So I got very, very interested in biological control. And that's really where I started being introduced to sustainable ag, like towards the end, or well, maybe towards the middle or end. And it became really important to me because I started realizing that, you know, hey, we have a lot of people to feed, a lot of things to do in the world with very, very limited resources, and they're depleting very fast. So I became very passionate about that. And so I started looking online for biological control companies, like specifically to do what I wanted to do. And a lot of the bigger companies, their job descriptions were very vague. So it was kind of hard for me to apply to something that I felt like was a good fit for me. There were things that were there that I felt like I could fit in, but it just didn't seem like it fit my interests 100%. So I found a company that was called Biomes, and their job description, it almost fit me perfectly. I was amazed at how well it fit me, and come to find out it was a scientist who actually wrote the job description. So it made sense that all of the keywords that would match what I actually did were actually in the job announcement. So I felt very confident about applying to it. And the guy called me, you know, the day that I applied, and I've been there ever since. And so I started there in July of 2020. So I've been there about 6 or 7 months. And basically what we do at Boost is we look in currently we're in environmental samples. So we're in agriculture, but we're not limited to agriculture. We could go to health sciences as well. But currently what we do is we take environmental samples, and we have a platform where we look for these synergistic networks or antagonistic networks of microbes. And then we use these consortia, we make consortia, microbial consortia, to make into products. So that's basically a mixture of microbes. So it could be a fungi that is synergistic, which is helpful to a bacteria. And if they work together and they can increase plant nutrients, then we deploy those two as a product. Or if they can control plant disease, then we can deploy them as a product to control plant disease. And we can look for organisms that work well together or organism that works by itself. But the goal is to find consortia so that they're less likely to break down in the environment. And so, yeah, that's where I am now, and I'm very happy to be here. I'm glad to talk to you guys, and any questions you have, please feel free to ask.
Thank you, Safira. Last but not least, Dr. Stephen Mirksy.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Jen, and for everybody who put this event together. Appreciate being a part of the day. And so I enjoyed hearing a lot of these nonlinear stories of how people arrived at where they are professionally. And so I'm hoping I can at least add a little bit of nonlinearity to the same trajectory that happened for me. So I'm a research scientist in the Sustainable Ag Systems Lab at Beltsville, Maryland with ARS. And as the name conveys, you know, we're the Sustainable Ag Systems Lab. So we focus on trying to develop more sustainable cropping systems. My focus is really kind of big, large acreage crops like corn, soybeans, wheat, cotton. But I have a big homestead at home, so I do a lot of stuff with veggies as well. And then so I'm really generally passionate about agriculture and sustainability. And I kind of had a similar nonlinear experience. You know, I went off to college. You know, I'm a city kid. I grew up right outside of New York City in Jersey, northeastern Jersey. So I didn't grow up in agriculture. There was nobody I knew in agriculture, and went out west looking for something different, and went to college out in Arizona, and quickly realized I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. So I dropped out of college. But before I did, I had gotten some time volunteering with a group called the Student Environmental Activists Coalition. And so it was kind of an environmental group that was focused around a lot of different environmental issues. But the big thing that really was transformative for me was they were very active in the Four Corners region with a lot of Native American communities. And so I started volunteering and going up to the Navajo reservation, and lo and behold, I was doing conservation work, water conservation, soil conservation on the Indian res. And then shortly after that, when I dropped out of school, I went back up there and lived up there for several months and was just kind of volunteering and working, and really got inspired by agriculture. So that kind of set the course for me. So when I went to go back to college, I found a school that was somewhat nearby, and started going into a degree. My bachelor's degree is in agroecology with a minor in forest ecology. And so it's a heavy emphasis on ecology and agriculture. And that experience there, I had a mentor who, it was a small teaching college, and in those environments, you get that intimate experience, and that mentoring is just huge. And so mine was a soil scientist who got me really excited about cover crops. And so next thing I know, that sort of just kind of then started the linear part of my life, which was, all right, I'm going to get a degree in agroecology. I want to go on to grad school. I thought I was passionate about teaching. That's kind of where I thought I was going to be. I didn't really think I was going to be a research scientist. And but I knew that I wanted to be multidisciplinary trained, not because I was so forward thinking that that's really the future, but because I just knew that I was passionate about soils and crops. And so I thought, I need to study both of those. Turned out being the best thing I ever did. So I got a master's degree in soil fertility, soil management, and a PhD in agronomy, with a pretty heavy emphasis on weed ecology, so like pest management. And that path obviously was fairly linear at that point. It was only up until about the end of my PhD that I actually decided that I liked research. Forever, I thought I was going to be faculty somewhere and mostly just focus on teaching. And I was the least passionate about research in the cohort of graduate students I was interfacing with. And something just sort of clicked, and enjoyed asking questions and thinking about problem solving. And it's a lot about who you know, right? So as I was kind of finishing up, this person that I had sort of written a grant with while I was in grad school for a postdoc was on that grant. He comes up visiting for a committee meeting for one of my colleagues' defenses, and he's telling us about some job opportunities that are opening up in the lab. And he starts describing the position. I'm like, that's me, that's me, that's me. All right, I'm going to apply for that. And so that's kind of the rest is history. I've been with the federal government now, I guess 13, 14 years as a research scientist. And this whole time has been really focused heavy around sustainability. So because I have a background in soils and agronomy, that's really kind of central to my theme. How do we develop sustainable agricultural systems that both conserve and build our soil resources while also maximizing productivities, efficiencies, as well as reducing the environmental footprint of our agricultural systems. So everything kind of focus around that. We'll work in both organic and conventional systems. And I'd say that early on in my career was focusing on a lot of kind of really niche systems that were not broadly adopted. We were working on these little, like developing no-till organic grain production systems. It's not broadly adopted. It's really hard to do well. And so we were really excited about all the ecology and the biology that can go into that. And so that was kind of a big part of my early focus. And I started to really want to have more broader impact across, large acreage crops where, more and more growers are adopting this, right? Organic is a small percentage of the ag sector. And then, organic no-till, who's doing that? And so we had folks who were interested in what we were doing, and it got a lot of energy around it. Both. So we just started focusing on really sustainability with cover crops and precision technologies as a whole. And so now I think that what really inspires me is really working in coordinated teams. And my background is multidisciplinary. My background is involved in multi-institution teams. And really that's where it's all at for me, is just getting people to play in the same sandbox so that we can not reinvent the wheel. And since most of these real innovation and precision and sustainable agriculture is very knowledge intensive, all of these practices are super knowledge intensive, lots of interactions, lots of different climate, soil, and management dynamics that drive all of this. And so if you're going to do this work well, you really need to bring folks together. Historically for me, it was, there's only so much we could do in a place-based study at our location. But if we can bring together large teams of folks across the country, we can start to really understand how climate and soil and management drive function and develop more sustainable cropping systems. And so that's what I do now, is I kind of coordinate large national teams, national cover crop breeding programs, national on-farm research networks, national teams using various different IoT systems and technologies for data acquisition on farm, and trying to find real-time analysis and visualization systems, both for researchers as well as for farmers and consultants and other ag professionals.
Awesome, thank you. Really, there are some really interesting parallels across all of these, all of your experiences and stories. And I think the nonlinearity is a big piece of this, and probably a lot of people who are participating in the webinar today can identify. I know that as an anthropologist myself and ending up working in a college of ag, I feel that. And I think that, you know, just from one of the things that's really exciting about it is being a person with feet in multiple worlds gives you a kind of unique insight. And so that's, I think, in lots of ways, increasingly an asset in these kinds of in solving or working on so many of these challenges that require us to bring knowledge from so many directions to try to address them and solve them. So thank you. So at this point, what I'd like to do is open things up for broader discussion across panelists. And so I'm just going to throw the question out, and please feel free to jump in. So I'm curious what you think are the kind of key sustainable ag and food system needs and opportunities today. And I know that that's a huge question, but in terms of sort of the most urgent or the most important, what stands out to you? And this is with the recognition that each of you sort of stand in different places vis-a-vis these questions, right? So I expect that you know, you'll have different perspectives on that answer.
Okay, I'll go first. I'll jump in there. I think in my opinion, where I am now, I think that one of the most important things that is kind of overlooked that is needed is more science communication. Being in biotechnology, I feel like the research is always there. There's always research to be done, and as a scientist, you always can understand fully what's going on and what needs to be done in terms of the science. But I think it gets bogged down a lot, and it doesn't translate well into the public, because our science doesn't necessarily matter if it's not. I mean, it can fill knowledge gaps for sure, and we need to know things. But if a lot of it doesn't translate into the real world, then it doesn't really serve the purpose of helping people or helping us to feed the world or to make land more arable or to make plants more survive more. So I think that science communication is something that is really underlooked, that is really needed, especially in the area of like biotechnology and bigger companies, to reach out to people to kind of share exactly how things happen I understand that patents and things are important and you can't share trade secrets, but there are like general conversations that you can have that can make people feel more comfortable about what you're doing, so that they don't reject everything that comes out, to make it more helpful. So that's one of the things I would say I think needs a lot of work actually for sustainable ag to work better.
Yeah, I would definitely second that. I think definitely in agriculture and being a farmer, there's just so much like misinformation or like lack of information on the public side. So in the work that I do, I find myself like just having to explain so much to people. There's a lot that people don't know. And there's a lot that people want to know. And, you know, they ask a lot of questions, but I'm just realizing the disconnect and how, like, I mean, again, you know, we all found a non-linear path to where we are because, you know, we were like, oh, well, that looks interesting, that looks interesting, you know. But we had to carve out sort of like where we are now, because there's not just clear paths into you know, into being a farmer. There's not clear paths to a lot of these industries because I think there's just not a lot of, you know, in the formalized education role of how to get there. So yeah, so being a farmer, I get so many people that call and ask, and they're like, how did you do what you're doing? I'm like, yo, I made it all up the whole way, guys. You know, but it's like, you know, there's a lot of like independent research that I do. It's a lot of reading. I mean, I just cannot understate to people how much personal reading, exploration, and, you know, researching you have to just do on your own. If there's not a path that's there, like to create that. So yeah, so I mean, communication and I think education is definitely needed. And then just clear opportunities for, I mean, there's so much, I think the field is wide open in ag and sustainability yeah, the field is wide open, and there's going to be a lot of like creating your own paths. There's going to be a lot of like seeing opportunities. Like if you see a hole, like that's the best place to focus and put your attention on and create solutions in those spaces. So someone who decides like, hey, I like farming, I like farmers, I like the industry, I like agriculture, but I don't necessarily want to be in the field farming because that's something very different, right? But then you also maybe have a marketing background and you like talking, you like marketing. Well, there's a gap in information between one sector and the information. So maybe you can create a path for yourself in, communicating that information, or being a resource for people to understand and, whatever. So you just have to like really pay attention to the industry and see where the opportunities are and kind of create stuff for yourself. And I think just be open-minded and recognize that, the path is gonna diverge so much. You start off one way, even in just how I've farmed, it's changed and it's shifted and there's constant learnings and adjustments and pivots and things like that. So just be open, be observant, be curious. Yeah.
I can add a little bit to that. I think just from my own experience, one thing to keep in mind is balance. And that can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. In sustainable agriculture, for example, I think the balance of making sure that you are calculated in your economic risk, for example. When I worked extension, I saw folks who were really struggling and I saw folks who were succeeding. And, 10 years later, I'd say 2/3 of them ended up doing something else, which is completely fine. But there's something to be said about, sticking to what you really want to do, but also keeping yourself open to other opportunities if something's just not working out. And also in terms of balance is in that whole equation, your own personal life. And I know we're here to talk about careers, but I think it's really important to keep that balance. And when you do find something that you're passionate about, it's easy to become myopic and ignore the things that really matter in life. So sustainable ag is, really making leaps and bounds right now. I think some of the work that's being done with vertical farming, our office of chief scientist works quite a bit with NASA on new plant breeding techniques and, making more yields with smaller plants. There's so many different ways you can go with this. And thinking to yourself, what is your goal here? Are you trying to really make this more profitable to be pursuing? Are you trying to make this more of a social endeavor to help give back to the community? I mean, there's so many different ways and paths this can take. And like Jamila was saying, something's going to sing to you and, you can always add something unique and of value that may not have existed before, but trying to do it all with a sense of balance, I think is probably the biggest thing I can share from my life experiences to try and, make things work. Nothing will succeed if the pendulum's too far to one way or the other.
Yes, I'll chime in here at the end here. So, most of us are familiar with this grand challenge, right, that we're facing here, right? We've got population and food demands that are, doubling. And so we have this tremendous need for increasing productivity. And we've got to do it in the face of all of these destabilizing factors in agriculture, like climate change, like pest resistance, increasing demand between urban and ag for water, reduced water, availability and soil quality. All of these critical issues are destabilizing factors, and we've got to scale up. And so, our slant has been, merging precision and sustainable ag. That's kind of our brand, right? Precision, sustainable ag. And so precision, because it's site specificity, right? We need to increase efficiencies and site specificity so that we're managing at smaller units. And that's really what historically older agriculture was, right? Was managing smaller units. And now we have much larger technologies that are requiring, much larger areas in which we're managing the same way, right? And then sustainability really gets at adaptive and resiliency. So precision from a site specificity point, sustainable from an adaptive and resiliency standpoint. I think that's a big part of how we both scale up, deal with these destabilizing factors, and also, reduce that environmental footprint. And so for me, that's been transdisciplinary teams, working across the sector. We have, folks like Jen, who's a social scientist on the team, studying everything we do and making sure that there's not only are we understanding how we do what we do and what are the barriers to adoptions of a given practice, but how does a theory of change work? How well is it working? And how effective is your model at trying to improve these systems? And then we work with, soil scientists, agronomists, pest scientists, modelers, technologists. I think technology is really one of the great inspiring solutions that we have in front of us now, because technology is giving us the ability to do site-specific management and do it in scalable ways. So we can develop technologies that work for a very small farm, that same technology applies for large-scale farm productions as well. And so the ability to have scalable technologies that are building solutions for everybody, I think, is a key part of that. And then I really resonate with what some of the other folks have said about communication. We're really focused around getting tools and decision support tools that are all communicating with each other and that are providing recommendation systems for growers, where it integrates a lot of things, rather than, a lot of farmers have fatigue because they're getting thrown a million tools and a million recommendation systems. There's a million websites, and so which one is the trustworthy one? Or, and then they have to go and find all those 10 different tools, rather than having all those tools communicating with each other so that they can have that integration, because farmers are the ultimate kind of multivariate analyzers, right? They're constantly analyzing so many factors all at the same time. And so it's really complicated. And so giving them tools that help reduce some of that complexity, or at least, give it all in an accessible format.
I want to jump on one point that you just made as well, Stephen, in terms of the scalability of solutions, because I think that is a really important point also for kind of social justice and equity in these systems, right? Because part of the challenges become when when there are solutions that are great for people of certain scale and then push down or push burdens onto growers of other scales. And of course, when we look across agriculture, we mostly see that smaller growers end up kind of bearing a lot of the heavy burdens, and policies get written for much larger growers. And so, one of the interesting things about some of these precision technologies, hopefully, is, the ability for those to serve smaller producers, producers who have traditionally been locked out of a lot of access to technologies. And so that's, I think, a really important point there. And actually, I'm going to use that to transition to a question that someone sent us before we even started the panel, which is that most of global population growth is happening in developing nations. And so how do you see the kind of work that you're doing, maybe directly or indirectly, sort of contributing to this kind of global challenges, a lot of inequity in terms of the needs at the global level around sustainable development? That may be a little bit abstract, but how does what you do or what you're working on at local levels, how does it connect to what's happening globally?
So I'll address it from some of the experience I had. So back in, I think it was 2012 or something like that, me and my business partner at the time got the opportunity to participate in a conference called Slow Foods. Slow Foods is an organization that works on preserving heirloom and old world varieties of different fruits, vegetables, whatever, and also those food ways, so how people prepare those food, those special systems, ways of preparing things. And they work globally, and they have a conference every 2 years in Turin, Italy, because that's where the conference was started. And so we got an opportunity to go in 2012, and at the time, it was also the year, I think, United Nations, or yeah, it was the year of the small farmer. And it's when I got an opportunity to go there. We're meeting farmers from over 100 and something different countries, and they're all like bringing information and sharing what we do here, and what we're doing in Thailand, what we're doing in South Africa, this, and the other, and just having those conversations with people. It just kind of like really opened my eye. And one of the things that was really eye-opening for me was, because it was the year of the small farmer, we were talking a lot about sort of what small farmers represent in the world. And one statistic that stuck out for me was that, like, I think they said like 80% of all the food that we like eat every day is really grown by small farmers. And I know a lot of our sort of like a lot of the conversation around ag, especially I think more in this country, is really taken up by like all of the issues, the pluses, the minuses, thinking about the sustainability of like really big farms, which really tend to grow more of like commodity crops, like you're saying, the soy and the corn and the cotton and things like that. But when you're talking about like vegetables, what you're eating every single day in the grocery store, things like that, those are really produced by small farms. Now, USDA's definition of a small farm, I think it's like less than 999 employees or something like that. But it just was like really interesting to kind of like realize that a lot of what we eat globally, and so when you're thinking about those developing countries, things like that, you still have a lot of their population of people that are growing food, and they'll have millions and millions of people that like their livelihood are as farmers. And I think if anyone's paying attention, there's a really large protest going on in India right now with farmers in India, because there's some changes to the rules that affects their livelihood. And so, I just, until I like kind of had that opportunity to travel internationally, I wasn't at all thinking about like how what I'm doing here in Georgia on 1.2 acres could, like, I didn't think about it more in a global way, but like as we're there talking to people and sharing, they're like, well, okay, well, what are the agriculture issues in your country, and how do you guys go to market and things like that? You realize that the way that we're able to just start a farm and go to market and operate it like a business, like anything else, like people don't have. Like, I was talking to a guy in South Africa, and he was like, oh no, we can't just create a market and go to market. We can't sell directly to the consumer. Like, we grow food, but we have to sell it, like, I guess through a government system, or they have to sell it to distributors, or they have to sell it for it to, I guess, get into the global market and for trade. So yeah, so I think, like the way that I'm farming, so like, my purpose, or like my purpose, or like what I try to achieve is like, how can I achieve maximum sustainability, but also like really, maximize my production and maximize what I'm able to grow here on a small acreage, and what does that look like? And also still thinking about like, okay, if I'm doing it in this way, can this be something that I can say we can repeat and it can be scalable, like small farms, but scaling up, and, how can we work together? I think a lot of solutions are going to be cooperative. A lot of solutions are going to be people coming together more, and I think trying to create farming systems that are just like these isolated individual, my farm, your farm, their farm. Like, we're going to have to think of solutions that allow that local, manageable piece of land that you can really have a handle on and operate sustainably, but then really coming together and maybe operate maybe from a business standpoint more collectively or whatever. So I'm seeing a lot of sort of like small farmers really kind of start to think and move in that direction, because we're burning ourselves out. We're burning ourselves out. That balance of family, the balance of how can you scale? You see the demand, and if we don't come up with solutions that can address or that can scale, then we're going to be out of the business in like 10, 15 years, because there's only so much your body can do when you're really working super, super hard. It's hard work. It's hard work. It's rewarding, but we have to figure out longevity. So yeah, so in terms of just sort of like the international and the developing world piece, I think we have to be connected to those systems, because we're all connected. Like what happens in India, what happens in South America, what happens wherever, it affects us, because we're getting our food from other countries. We're getting our food from those communities, and looking at policy, and being interested on the policy side. I think we definitely need more people on the policy side, and looking at our trade policies and things like that. And are they supporting? Are they destabilizing? Do they support farmers? Do they support industry, like whatever? So just, you have to think beyond what you're doing, just where you are.
Yeah, that's a really, really important point on multiple levels. The link to sort of global and local, both scale of production and global and local policies that govern the kind of trade and interconnection. We are all connected in that. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. We have a couple of questions that really ask on the theme of public-private government interaction. And, so for people who work in the government, how often do you interact with non-governmental groups, and what do those projects look like, and vice versa? Who's willing to tackle that?
I'll tackle that one. We have currently, it's a little hard now with COVID. It's hard to get out there and interact with different groups. But one thing, we do have a project that we're starting to do with another actual graduate at UGA that I connected with. She lives out here in California also, and she's on the Wine Grape Commission. So we're going to work with her on sampling some of the vineyards for microbial communities to see if we can find some synergists in their soil to hopefully make a biopesticide or a biofertilizer. And she was really excited, and I was really excited to connect with her to be able to work with her in that context, because she's not in industry or in the government or anything like that. And there are other small community farms that we wanted to reach out to and go out to and communicate with them and talk with them and see if they were also interested in collaborating with us as well. And that's something our CSO is definitely looking into doing. They told me before I got there that they did more, that they did go out into the community more than that. But once COVID hit, things just kind of slowed down a little bit. But we are trying to pick it back up slowly but surely.
And just to add to that, at least for my position in USDA, I work with non-federal stakeholders daily. It is so imperative for us to not be working in a box and ignoring the feedback from our stakeholders. There are things, literally daily, there are things come up that I'm not even aware of that are within the federal government that are occurring that I hear about through our external stakeholders. So for me, at least, I am constantly communicating. We are always trying to figure out new ways to better communicate and increase transparency with non-federal entities. And so, for example, we do something as basic as a newsletter on Fridays that have opportunities and grants and latest research and what's in the news for pollinators, because that's our audience. But something as simple that takes an hour to do a week, huge payoffs in terms of just, again, transparencies and making sure that everyone's on the same page and aware of what's what's going on. And so, we're always trying to work to figure out better ways to communicate and make sure everyone is on the same page. But, at least for us, it's really, really critical to keep those communication lines open and healthy.
I would just add to this that it's also really encouraged, right? From the agency perspective, it's or at least within the USDA and the agency I'm in, Agricultural Research Service, it's strongly encouraged. Partnership is how you increase impact. It's a necessity to have strong relationships with your stakeholders, and so both from like a professional standpoint, but also like if you look at the funding mechanisms that a lot of folks are going after, that we're writing grants to expand on our existing funding within areas. Most of those programs are strongly encouraging and advocating for multidisciplinary research, team science, working across the ag sector. So I think that while historically maybe that wasn't as much an emphasis, it's really in today's climate of R&D, it's really emphasized.
Kind of on that note, we haven't, it's a related note, I guess, a question about that specifically for the USDA folks, but about where interdisciplinary ag careers are going in the federal government. And this actually relates to sort of a broader question about like interdisciplinarity and selling yourself. But, what are your thoughts about how government agencies think about interdisciplinarity and how to frame yourself for government jobs in that sense?
You want to go first, or I can?
Sure. When I was a graduate student, I remember very well my master's advisor saw how broad I was in scope. I come from this bachelor's degree in agroecology, and I was talking about going on a PhD agronomy. He's like, people don't really do that, right? People go and get a bachelor's degree in soil science. They get a master's degree in soil science. They get their PhD in soil science, and now they're a soil scientist. And that's kind of what he was saying was the trap, which was expected. And it was like everything that didn't fit my model. And so early on in my career, I was quite anxious about this. Is this going to be, am I not going to be an expert enough, or whatever. And I think that multidisciplinary science is really valued now more than ever. And I think it enables you to work across scales and work with different teams and build partnerships and relationships. It's the happiest part of my day is working with lots of different experts and having that diverse perspective. And so I think that from an agency perspective, it seems like it's valued more and more. Certainly in my agency, there's definitely been a more selective focus on, the expert having that linear path, but you see more and more multidisciplinary trained scientists in the agency. And I can't say whether, how that is or is not being encouraged, but it doesn't seem like a liability at all.
Mm-hmm.
Right, I agree. And at least in my experience, I think that folks are pretty on board with the basics of making sure that social scientists are working with those more in the hard science realm. Like I feel like we're there, but now we're having to go into the next realm where, as Stephen had mentioned, this need for developers and data managers and engineers that may have absolutely nothing to do with what your area is, but they're going to be the right people to talk to. So how do you find them, and how do you loop them in, and how do you get them excited about a particular topic? And that, at least for me, we spend a lot of our time trying to answer some of those questions. And in the end, just as a quick example, we were doing some priority setting across a bunch of different disciplines here, over 70 different federal employees from different disciplines that have something to do with pollinators, to figure out where we want to go. And across every single person, every single group, the same key things kept coming up, which were the need for, as was discussed earlier, the need for better communications in the science realm, the need for better data management, the need for better basic information on biology that we can then integrate into correct multivariate analyses. I mean, it was like, I was shocked at how redundant the needs were, which to me is good because it gives us a clear path on where we need to go next.
And I guess a related question to that is that question of how do you, as an interdisciplinary scientist or researcher, then how do you make sure that you don't end up labeled with the kind of like fickle or indecisive kind of label? Any advice?
My advice would be, you have to really, that comes to being like a good fit and actually understanding the job announcement. So you have to really understand what the job announcement is asking for. And even if you are interdisciplinary, you have to target what part of your skill fits what that job description is asking you for. And then you apply based on that. And then once you get added to the company, your extra skills are a bonus. And then you can start being creative about how you can apply maybe something you are a little bit more passionate about that maybe wasn't mentioned in the job description. Then you can apply that at a later time. But you have to really get comfortable or really good with wordplay and making sure that you're actually submitting an application that addresses the actual need that they have. Like Elizabeth said, they have many different needs. Like, do we need a data scientist? Do we need a microbial ecologist? Like, what do they need and how can you fulfill that need? Because at the end of the day, it's about fulfilling that need. And you have to be really short and to the point about how you can fulfill that need, because you can elaborate in the interview when you get asked questions, but you need to make your resume very short and concise and to the point, because people don't thumb through 7-6 page, well, I don't know, maybe at USDA, because you have to submit a little bit lengthier of an application. But like in biotechnology industry, we thumb through, if a CV is like more than 3 or 4 pages, it kind of gets overlooked because we can't scan that very quickly. So you need to be good with words and how to capture your skill in like a sentence, basically in bullet points, so that people can be like, boom, boom, okay, this is what they have, this is what we need. We're going to move that to that pile because that person looks interesting. And then they'll pick through your CV or your resume after that when they talk with you. So that would be my advice.
Good point.
One thing to add to that, and I think it's so ironic, this has all come full circle, but at a UGA career day, when I was at UGA, we had someone come and talk about working for the federal government. And it is so important, this is just for the feds, you're first analyzed by a computer. And so if they are looking for someone in the geospatial realm, you better write geospatial, because that's the term the computer's looking for. And the second I knew that trick, I was getting interviews. And so it's kind of what you're saying, like you really have to just nail what they're looking for. What are those core attributes or skills? And then, in the actual formal interview, and later on you can always, go further. But just for a federal job, just remember that key keyword situation, and you'll see a big difference if you're getting rejections, as I did, and then suddenly getting lots of interviews. It's just how it works because there's so many applications, but something to keep in mind.
Jamila, I'd like to ask you, as someone who sort of like is making your own space instead of sort of trying to figure out how do you fit into a jigsaw puzzle. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I could definitely support everything the other panelists said in terms of like when I was applying and, working for the state, is that, definitely making sure you understand the job description, making sure you have the skill sets and you can meet what they're saying. But in terms of like creating my own, I think my success has been because of all of the other non-ag related, background that I have, and just in how you think about how you approach something. So I think, engineering at UGA is very we have a really broad program. When you're undergrad engineering, you really get a little bit of every single aspect of the engineering discipline. And so, and just, it kind of taught me how to think and how to analyze data, how to analyze information, how to think about things more from a system standpoint, because, there's so many variables and inputs, like Stephen was saying, that farmers are dealing with constantly. We're always analyzing day in and day out. I'm always checking the weather. I'm always like, seeing what's going on. You got to know what the markets are. So you just have to, you can't be siloed in your thinking. You can't be siloed in even just that kind of information that you absorb. I have to pay attention to trends in food. I have to pay attention to what's going on with the weather and trends in, like weather patterns. I have to pay attention to like what's going on with, my suppliers and seed companies. I mean, you're dealing with, so much. So yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I'm answering the question, but yeah.
One of the things that I'm pulling out of these answers is both that like the importance of telling what appears to be a coherent story to sort of get into the conversation, into the interview, those kinds of things. But then it sounds like all of you have kind of addressed the idea that then that interdisciplinarity is a real asset once you sort of get into the conversation, having all these other tools that you can bring into the problem solving, into the conversation, those become really big assets. But that kind of initial, like, tell the coherent story, even if there's a little bit of like, all right, I'm going to leave some of these things out in my like, initial approach to getting in the door. And I mean, I can definitely feel like, my own experience, I feel that that's absolutely the case. How do you tell a coherent story and then bring that interdisciplinarity to bear? Awesome. So one of the other kinds of questions that it seems like we have quite a bit here is around the issue of like diversity and inclusivity in agriculture and and where you think that the conversation and the movement is on that front. Are there opportunities to sort of, or what are the opportunities to seize on or to address the issues of equity and justice in agriculture right now? What opportunities do you see there?
I'll go. That addressing inclusion and addressing equity, all of that in agriculture, that's a lot to try to address, right? Like when I just entered the field, I mean, I didn't enter it thinking like I'm going to be a Black female farmer. I'm just like, I like farming. I'm going to do it. Like, I think it's a really great solution for a lot of things. And then you just realize like the structure of our system is based in so much. The structure of agriculture in America is just so steeped in racism and control of land and who has access and who doesn't have access. Unfortunately, a negative history of USDA against, minorities, and all of that. And so as you're entering the field, as you're entering the work and, the further you get in ag, you come up against a lot of that and you come up against it in a bunch of different ways and just operating a business, what you have access to, what you don't have access to. So, or what you're pushing to have access to. So as a person of color, as a minority, I'm going to tell you, it's going to be harder. It just is because things are stacked against you a little bit. But there is a movement to within USDA, just globally. I mean, I think we've all seen it, with Black Lives Matter, and even previous to that, with people really addressing equity and figuring out what are those structural things in our system that are keeping certain people, from accessing the resources that they need to be efficient to operate. What are the structural things in our system that we are not even aware of that creates lack of access for certain communities? So, you know, it's a long road to get to correcting that. But I will say that having that experience, or having that, if that's something that you have as a discipline or a minor or anything around, like, you know, understanding peoples and cultures and access, and, you know, that you can bring to a field, I think that'll be really good, because people are looking for, you know, like, you know, I'm on the board of a lot of agricultural organizations that have been around for some time, and that's, you know, something that's front and center. And they're looking to, you know, people on their board, or they're looking for people that they're hiring to bring that skill set of, how do I bridge the gap? How do I create? How do we make sure we analyze what we're doing, and that we don't have barriers internally that we're not aware of? And then how do we make sure that the programming that we have, or the, you know, the things that we're trying to do, is accessible, and or is equitable, or does not exclude certain communities, but invites in those communities. So anything that you can do, if that's something that you're passionate, interested in, I would say definitely, if you don't have the, you know, I don't know if there's a, you know, degree or certificate programs, but like, go work in those fields and those industries. There's a lot of policy-based groups. National Young Farmers really works to be a voice for a lot of the young farmers that are coming into agriculture, but they also have a really big lens on equity and inclusion, and making sure that, you know, the policies that they're fighting for addresses all that. And I think I want people to also understand that whatever it is that you fight for in terms of equity and inclusion, it's going to be a benefit to everyone, right? So it's not like, oh, I'm just looking to create opportunities for one group of people. You're looking to create a system that includes everyone. So the work that you do towards that is work that is going to be strengthening society as a whole, because, you know, a good, functioning, happy, loving, wonderful society is going to take everybody knowing that they're a part of it, and that they can access and they can participate, and they're not hampered by anything else. So the work of equity and inclusion is work that includes, and that benefits all of us. So
Awesome. Thank you. That's really important, and I appreciate that. We have a question that kind of builds off of the conversation earlier about the importance of communication. So for all of the panelists, from your experience, what do you think that communities and the general public, what role do you think communities and the general public can play in pushing for more sustainable food systems? What do you think is the role of the public and kind of in pushing that, moving the needle on that more generally?
Demand drives supply, right? So if folks are asking for it, you know, people will figure out how to offer it. And if enough people are offering it, you know, the price will get to a point, hopefully, that it's affordable for more than just those that are able to pay premiums for specific types of, you know, food or fiber or other things that are, you know, being produced agriculturally. So, you know, we've seen that happen around here with, I mean, just with honeybees specifically, where people are trying to breed for more sustainable stock so that it can reduce the amount of pesticides we have to use in colonies. And it's become a whole thing. Like, even in the last 10 years, it's gone from maybe a few people doing it to most everyone is able to do it and enjoying it. And, you know, and that's just one example of many, but I feel like it takes like 5 or 10 years. If something starts to pick up and there's interest and it makes sense economically, it'll get adopted.
So voting with your pocketbook.
It's certainly been my experience as well. I mean, we work with, you know, I can't really speak from the consumer's perspective, but I can speak of like consumer companies I work with, right? Like PepsiCo, and Unilever. These are big organizations, right? Big companies, and they're now incentivizing a number of them. And I'm on grants with them where they're providing cost share for cover crops. And so they're incentivizing cover crop practice. They're increasing cover crop adoption, and that is providing a source of matching when I'm writing grants that require those matching funds for funding. And so that's been a key way of pushing that sustainability agenda forward, right? Is we're having a lot of traction in our sustainable ag programs, and getting those resources are needed. And these consumer companies have said to me time and time again, this is what our consumers want. So we're doing it. And so there's a large number of those consumer companies now I'm seeing that we're collaborating with, from not informing policy, because that's what we don't do that. We provide data. And so, for example, a number of big companies are involved in the ecosystem service marketplace or carbon markets, and they're trying to value these food systems and production practices. And so, for example, we're providing data for the models that are being used in those networks. We don't inform that, but that my experience has been that these number of these companies are motivated around these sustainability agendas, and that's why they're incentivizing the practice.
So this is an opportunity for me to sort of like put a stick in the ant's nest or something. I have a question related to that, which is thinking about, to some degree, right, that can end up labeled as kind of greenwashing efforts or whatever. But I'd like to think about, like, it sounds like what you're saying, Stephen, is that while that, well, you're not saying this, I want to make that clear, but while the motivation perhaps of corporations is because their customers want to see them contributing to more sustainability initiatives, that by then putting the money in it and partnering with you feel like you're able to put that to work in doing something that moves the needle. Is that, like, I don't know, I think I'm just observing something, but I'm thinking about those public-private partnerships that might on one level look like, okay, we're throwing some money towards something we're calling sustainability, but the flip side is it funds research and groups like yourself and others to actually do the work on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're reframing it and saying the same things, and so I don't really have much to add. I mean, I certainly can't comment on the greenwashing aspect of all of that. But what I can say is that these companies that are incentivizing sustainability goals, whether it's from a water quality perspective, right? A number of them are doing this because of our cover crops because of a water quality perspective, and they're also from a carbon and a soil health perspective. Every dollar that they're providing in incentivization programs like that, when we're developing, grants and public-private partnership programs that, like, for example, the USDA, these are USDA grants, right? Like NRCS provides, public-private partnership grants, right? And so when we're getting in a collaboration with these folks, it's advancing these companies' motivations around these sustainability goals, and it's directly enabling us to get these resources, right? Because these public-private partnership grants, they require the matching. You're not going to get the grant unless you're coming to the table with private sector matching funds. So it's a requirement. And ARS scientists, we don't lead these ones. I'm part of these collaborators. We can't lead because you can't use federal dollars as matching. None of that is an option. So these are like, a university partner is collaborating in these projects, and they're submitting the grant, and there's private matching from the private company, and that is accelerating our technologies and our systems and our on-farm monitoring and cover crops and all the things that we're doing that are part of that sustainability work. Is that, I don't know if I just repackaged it.
Yeah. No, that's kind of what I was asking about is about that relationship, and and just thinking about the kind of the complexities of it a little bit. Jamila, you wanted to add something.
Yeah. I was gonna say that, in addition to, obviously consumers voting with your pocketbooks, and I think definitely what we're seeing in industry with but you would not consider to be a, you know, a PepsiCo, Walmart, or things like that. You're not thinking of those as like, you know, industry or groups that are sustainable or even have sustainability in mind. Because consumers have demanded more, and, you know, understand that this movement of organic has been happening for some time, you know, for many years. And so it's gotten large enough that it is now, you know, moving the needle, and people are seeing the need of at least just responding to the demand. But then the other side is, I think, you know, a lot of these companies are also recognizing. So yeah, so one thing first, before, you know, beyond, you know, just voting with your pocketbooks, you can also vote with your voice, because not everyone has a large enough pocketbook to, you know, where they can make an impact, you know, definitely collectively. But I think, you know, definitely voting with your voice. And so for me, or rather what I see is that really government is what drives, you know what I mean, change in a lot of places. And so if we're able to, you know, participate in the political system to, you know, your local, you know, senator, you know, representative, people like that, you know, getting what you feel is important to them so that they can, you know, then take that, you know, and do the work that they have to do. If we're able to, you know, make enough of a change of a you know, speak your mind and communicate what it is that's important to you around food, around sustainability in every aspect of our lives, then those dollars federally can be, you know, can be made available for the research or for whatever, or for investment in this industry sector or whatever. So I think people don't understand that government really has the ability to shift the needle, but they need their citizens to engage to help them, you know. So without citizen engagement, then yeah, you have, you know, private industries that, you know, have a lot of voice and can, you know, make things happen. But I've definitely seen in my 10 years of, you know, growing food and, you know, people be able to move the needle on things, you know, by being engaged in the process collectively. And then the other thing, like in my experience working for the state, so, you know, I'm inspecting a lot of these industries like Coca-Cola and all of these, you know, really big industries, not just in ag, but like all across the board. But one of the things, we were at a conference one year and the keynote speaker was like the head of sustainability for Coca-Cola or something like that. And what I realized is that their investment in sustainability is not just it's not just like responding to demand, but it's also responding to stability of their operations. You know what I mean? And they're recognizing that, like, all of the things that we, you know, that we're dealing with climate change and with, you know, water, you know, like, you know, if so many industries use water, and if water becomes a resource that they don't even have access to, it hurts their bottom line and it hurts their ability to continue to do what they do. If, you know, the environment in which, you know, they're operating is unstable due to whatever. So their investment in sustainability is also an investment in trying to make sure that they're, you know, in some way going to exist, you know, in the future. And they're recognizing that they can no longer just ignore what happens around them and just be like, we'll just continue on with these resources, because yeah, there is a demand, not just in industry, but there's demand just because, you know, world population keeps growing every year. Those same resources, we have to figure out how to use them, how to make sure that they're available for everybody to continue to do what they're doing. So, so that is going to be a really great asset. You may find that an opportunity for you exists, you know, in your field within an industry or at a, you know, at a big corporation or something like that, but you're bringing this multidisciplinary sustainability lens to the work that they do and helping them to think about, you know, if I build a plant in this region, how can I do that in a sustainable way? How can I do that so that it's not all extractive and it operates, you know, in a way that in a more sustainable manner. So there's a lot of opportunities, I think, in just all aspects of the field where sustainability and a multidisciplinary type of background can really be beneficial to. So just don't think that there's only like, oh, I can go into government, I can go into research, or I can, be working for Greenpeace or something like that. Like it is needed everywhere in every industry and all sectors all across the board.
That's a really, really good point. We have about 9 more minutes, and I have 2 quick questions. Well, they may not be quick, but I'm going to try to make them sort of short answer, if possible. So how has the pandemic, like we've all heard the how's the pandemic question, so I guess I have to give it too. How's it offered some unexpected opportunities in the kind of work that you do, right? We all know of the challenges, but were there unexpected opportunities that emerged from this at all in your work?
I'll go. Actually, it has been surprisingly good for, I know, small ag. So a lot of, there are about 30 operating farms in the city of Atlanta, ranging in scale from like a 1/4 acre up to 7 acres. And for us, we have seen just an insane increase in demand for local food, fresh food, healthy food. So many more customers. I think it just shone a light on obviously everything in our world and the fragility of our systems. And oh my God, people thought we were going to run out of food in the grocery store. So there was a big oh my God, support your local farmers, because hey. So it just really brought a lot of people who maybe thought about engaging, supporting local, like it was cute, but they just saw it as more of an essential business, and they saw it as something that was essential not to just food stability, but also like their health and their wellness. So we have seen a lot of people really engage and support and try to figure out how can we keep this local industry alive? How can we grow it? What do we need to do to support farmers? Things like that. So I'm encouraged in talking with the different organizations that I'm on the board of, we have a rare opportunity right now while we have so many people that have really kind of entered the space of supporting local, supporting your growers, supporting farmers, supporting organic agriculture. And now we're all just figuring out, how do we capture those people? How do we get enough information to them? And how do we keep them on as the world starts to maybe kind of go back to normal, or hopefully it doesn't go back to normal. So that's been the experience, just from, on the farmer side, small, farmers operating. There's just so much interest and so much demand and so much more support and so many more people that have become more aware of the work that we're doing, how they can support and how they want to continue to support. And we've also seen a lot of interest from, I think, private foundations, investment groups that are based around ag and based around sustainable agriculture. There's been a lot of investment from the private side, with a lot of interest in supporting local ag and those systems. And so, again, that's another place for where, you might not think working with foundations, working with local organizations that, they're just managing a portfolio of dollars. They just have money and they're like, we want to invest in some kind of sustainability initiatives. You can be there informing and directing, what that means, what does that look like, what industries, can you support? So, that's been our experience.
Awesome. Anyone else want to weigh in on this one? Okay, we'll move on. Last question. What kind of final advice would you give if there's one thing that you could tell a graduate student about to enter the workforce who wants to make a contribution to sustainable ag? What is the one thing that you would offer them?
In terms of applying to jobs, you mean?
Yeah, I guess the question is really, what kind of advice would you give a graduate student? We've talked a little bit about like, tell that coherent story about yourself, get your foot in the door, but is there anything that you would tell them to prepare with, or training that they need, or approach to take, one piece of advice for someone getting out of school and stepping into the workforce right now?
One general piece of advice I would say is, if you want to specifically be in sustainable ag, looking in the job force, it may not look exactly like what you want it to look like. So you may have to be comfortable, again, like fitting into what a particular place is that you want to work for is asking for. And when you may get to that place and it may be exactly what you're looking for, the job maybe just didn't do a very good job of showing that. But you have to be able to be creative enough to apply to a job and still bring what you want in terms of sustainability to that particular place you want to work in. But that would be my biggest thing. Like if you're looking through all these job announcements and you're like, that just doesn't sound sustainable. That just doesn't seem like what I want to do. They probably don't look, a lot of the jobs that they don't look like they would be for sustainable ag specifically. So I would just be mindful of that.
That's great advice.
I think to add to that, oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna pretty much say the same thing. Like, just be open and look for opportunities in unexpected places. That's really just
sounds like stealth mode. Izzy.
So I agree. You may find jobs that are in the sustainability realm that don't seem to be the right trajectory, but a trick I have used many times, don't tell anyone, is once I wait until I'm offered the job. I'll keep my mouth shut, and then I will say I want to have another discussion with whoever's in charge of hiring regarding some questions about what can this job offer to me? Because this is a two-way road. You're not just selling yourself, they have to sell themselves to you too. So if you're gung-ho about specific aspects of sustainable ag, but don't want to come across as too forward in an interview, just ask after they've offered it. And I've never had someone tell me no. There's been times where I've rejected a job after I've heard what the parameters are. And there's been times that I've been even more excited about a job after speaking with them. So there's nothing preventing you from doing that.
That's great advice.
I guess we've got 2 minutes left, so I'll just add one more comment to it, I guess. Get uncomfortable. That's my recommendation. Get uncomfortable. Like, it's like all of this is, as we described, all of us come from these nonlinear trajectories to get where we are. And if you're passionate, you care about sustainability, get yourself into situations, try things out. You will find things you like and things you don't like, and that's okay. It's often best to know what you don't like than to fully figure out what you do like. So that keeps ricocheting you in the direction you need to go, right? And so and be prepared to struggle and be prepared to be stressed. That's kind of how this game is, right? And then I'd say the biggest is communication skills and people skills, right? I mean, it's like in all of these jobs, especially all of us talked about multidisciplinary focus, being able to communicate with different folks and different audiences and working on that and getting out of your comfort zone to work on that. None of us were like intrinsically good at this, right? We kind of had to be out there all the time, putting our feet in our mouth, failing, struggling, or confused. But because we kept putting ourselves out there, we continue to grow and learn. And so that's part of the whole process.
Yeah. This is a really great way to end it too. And so I really appreciate all of your advice. I know that, we had at one point 39 people attending this. So I feel like there was a lot of interest and undoubtedly a lot of really great takeaways. So I want to thank you all one more time on behalf of the UGA Sustainable Food Systems Initiative, our Interdisciplinary Grad Certificate, and our USDA funded National Needs Fellows and Fellowship. We really appreciate all of you for taking the time today. Yes, go about your lovely afternoons. Thank you so much one more time. Thank you all. And thanks to folks who attended.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.